we're going to talk about individuation, and I thought I would bring in 3 different ways to think about individuation. We can talk about these. The letter to Mr. Van Waveren of September 25th, 1946. You could say that the whole world, with its turmoil and misery, is in an individuation process. But people don't know it. That's the only difference. If they knew it, they would not be at war with each other, because whosoever has the war inside himself has no time and pleasure to fight others. Individuation is by no means a rare thing or a luxury of the few, but those who know that they are in such a process are considered to be lucky. They get something out of it, provided they are conscious enough. Of course, it is a question whether you can stand such a procedure, but this is the question with life too. Millions of people couldn't stand it, as you know from recent events. Individuation is just ordinary life and what you are made conscious of. If anybody should marvel at it, he must have been unprepared for what life holds in store for everybody. All best wishes. So, basically he's saying that, countries are individuating, all groups are individuating. Certainly this country is individuating this year.
So when he says, he says about being conscious of it, how do you relate to that? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's something like John's experience, where he was arguing with himself about, should I bring up the shadow or not? And what the Jungians would say is, if you don't bring it up, it's going to eat you somehow. And so you need to bring it up, know what's in there, and get it to work together with your life.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is, it makes it sound like you have to talk about it. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't think you have to talk about it. I think you can do it. You should be aware of it.
But no, I'm sorry. Does it have to be reduced to words in some way, one or another? What else could it be?
It could be paintings.
Music.
It could be music, sure. I've heard a variety of new music, which I really detest, for example. But
it might not be music.
Yeah, it might not be music. And then there's rock music, where they say if you go to a rock concert and you put a raw egg on the stage, by the end of the concert, the raw egg will be boiled, will be hard. It literally gets boiled in the sound waves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So the rockers are up there cooking, I guess, in a real literal sense.
Yeah. Well, then there's what happened to me, because I have tinnitus and 12 frequencies in my ear, and I got that from the pistol range. Right? And I remember when it happened. I was 25 years old, or now 24 years old, I guess. And I didn't have earphones, and just these loud noises for an hour. And after that, I've heard tinnitus ever since. It's like a concert. and there's no real cure for it either.
You just ignore it.
Yeah, you pretend it doesnn't bother you. That's what the.
And if you get upset, it gets worse.
Yeah, that's right. If you focus on it, does get worse. Anyway, so the individuation process is what you are becoming, what you are designed for in your life, whatever it is. And so if we take it simply as something like an acorn. Okay, every oak tree, no, every, or a kitty cat, or a doggy, a kitty cat. All living things know how to become themselves, right? So if you plant a seed, it becomes the plant of that seed. And although, a rose is a rose, every rose is different. Every oak tree is different. And every human being is different. And so, but we're all designed to do something. And the process of individuation, which is a lifetime process, is a process where you're trying to learn what is the thing for you. And Joseph Campbell, who was a famous follower of Jung, although he rarely admitted it, but Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. In other words, do the things that you love, and that will take you where you were designed to go in your life. I mean, you may have different opportunities in life, for example, because you were born in Colombia, but you were designed for something. I don't know what it's for. I mean, you're obviously thinking about doing graduate school in the United States, and that could lead to many things. And maybe if you come here a few more times, you might get interested in this. So instead of doing just plain old psychology, you might want to go to Zurich to the Jung Institute, or New York. There's one in New York also. Anyway, so that's that.
Plain old psychology is getting pretty complex now.
Yeah, I mean,
Cognitive.
my daughter majored in psychology in college, and as near as I could tell, in her whole major, undergraduate major, she only had 2 paragraphs about Carl Jung in her whole career in college. Okay, so this is another summation of individuation by a Jungian who's on Facebook, who I know slightly. And Gwynne wrote this up to sort of provide an overview of individuation. So she has 4 stages, 4 parts of individuation. And those are becoming conscious of the shadow. We're sort of conscious of the shadow now, I think. Then becoming conscious of anima and animus, and then becoming conscious of the archetypal spirit, and finally becoming conscious of the self. So I'll just read through what she has to say here. I once, years back, did a paper on individuation, aging, and meaning, and I'm taking an excerpt from this as I may speak to some of you as to what you are going through in individuation. Hillman, this is James Hillman, quotes the Jungian Aniela Jaffe as once saying, the psychological path of individuation is ultimately a preparation for death. But what is individuation? It is a process of maturation in which the psyche ages or matures in much the same manner as the physical body. The general guidelines are summarized by Jacobi as consisting of 4 parts. Becoming conscious of the shadow. The shadow is our dark side, containing those things we have repressed and ignored for one reason or another. It usually manifests to us in dreams as an archetypal figure who is dark and ominous. Just as the persona is the part of us that we want to present to the world, so the shadow contains those things that we want to hide from the world and from ourselves. This dark side of ourselves must be confronted and accepted, at least in part, as the first step in the individuation process. Johnson emphasizes the need to acknowledge and accept our shadow in order to become a whole and complete person. Okay. obviously we've been talking about this for 3 months, so we're talking about things that are going on in the psyche, right? So then is becoming conscious of anima or animus. Basically, the anima is the feminine soul or inner femininity for every man, and the animus is the inner masculinity of every woman. The individuation process is, above everything else, a process of wholeness. This includes sexual completeness. Jung wrote that the anima and animus represent functions which filter the contents of the collective unconscious through to the conscious mind. Thus, when the ego seeks to find the inner self, it must look through the anima or animus, which colors its perception in many different ways. Edinger distinguishes 4 separate progressive states of maturation in the ego's relation to the anima. 1, the infantile state, in which the ego is totally unaware of the anima or animus. 2, the projected state, in which the anima or animus is projected outward into people of the opposite sex. 3, the possessed state, in which the ego is possessed or governed by the anima or animus. And 4, the conscious state, in which the ego becomes conscious of the anima or animus. Experiences? It's like the love at first sight. It's like love at first sight, the person across the room, right? And or the beautiful person across the room. Okay, now if you're projecting the anima, or you see a beautiful woman across the room and you say, oh,
you don't
boy,
really see her, you see your projection.
Yeah, there's a great photograph of the statue of David in Florence. Okay, and in front of it are 4 nuns, and one of them is pointing up at David, and the caption reads, "I don't know much about art, but I know what I like." I don't know much about art, but I know what I like. So that's a projection of animus. But then the possessed state is where, let's say a man goes from woman to woman, from marriage to marriage. In the possessed state, you see the woman across the room and it's instant love, and then you start changing your life because of that woman.
But that's very discriminatory, isn't it? I mean, it's like 1 in a million or whatever.
No, not necessarily. I mean,
everywhere.
You mean some people
my wife.
See, I go.
some people can project like to anybody?
You're doing it all the time.
Constantly to everyone.
Yeah, you're constantly doing projections, but then when you get possessed, it means your psyche gets lost, and you have to go be with that woman. Okay, it's not just an appreciation across the room.
Yeah, that's until you start recognizing it, become conscious of it.
Right.
And then
It's
you
not
got
a real person. It's this.
You
Right.
realize you're
It's an
not
idealization.
You realize that person's not who you're thinking.
And no one
It's
can.
not a rare thing. It's like
No, it happens constantly.
Some people know how to fit into your projection. Right.
The projection pulls back.
The honeymoon's over.
Right, and that's the point. All male-female relationships
There you go.
end in this, or not end, but they go through this where when they get married, they think one thing about one another, and after that, then they've been married for a period of time. Maybe they think something else about them, and this isn't the woman I thought I married, type thing, right?
That's why, well, then you should have a longer engagement. If that's
Like
the
50
problem.
years.
That's the
Right.
reading period.
You wouldn't see it. Yeah, even with the longer engagement, you wouldn't necessarily see it.
But some people know how to play it as well.
Hide stuff.
But it can happen, if you're if you're not getting along well with the spouse, for example, and then some woman comes along that all of a sudden she's your soulmate. I mean, this happened to me, where I was married for 17 years. I mean, she wanted me to become a lawyer in my hometown. Then you didn't meet my wife yesterday, but we became among the first couples in the world to meet online and marry 10 years before the World Wide Web got started, the commercial World Wide Web. I mean, we were just doing it on internet networks that were run by the Defense Department and things like that. Bill remembers, but
Yeah. When I was on.
but I sent out one of the first spams, and my wife responded to me, and immediately we started to interact, sight unseen, okay, where she was just communicating with me, and I'm saying, geez, this woman is much more like what I'm interested in. I never saw her. I hadn't seen a photograph of her yet. And a week later, I came to Washington because I wanted to meet her. I mean, partially. I also came down to see the plant that she was trying to sell at the time, which I wanted to sell in China. But the point is that my I guess shadow side, my anima projection, was already going over to her at the time that I said, I got a response to my spam. It was one of the first spams. I had sent it out to 35 people. I got a response. I think I should go back and look at this person, look at their interests again. So I go back and look at the interests, and it's Japan, Japanese language, yachting, and a few other things that I was interested in. And I said, oh my goodness, this is a woman like I'd like to meet. And then she decapitated me because I had no hope. Because when I was in college, of course, I was going to get my master's degree in Asian studies by going to Vietnam, but I wanted to get a master's degree from the University of Hawaii East-West Center, which was a terrific program back in the late 60s and early 70s, where the Congress of the United States was sending young scholars to Hawaii for 2 years to get a master's degree at this East-West Center. And, I thought I should do that. I get shown into her office, and she walks in. First of all, she's got long brown hair. I don't know, did you see the picture in the downstairs of my house yesterday of my mother? Did you walk down the hall?
No.
Okay. Well, there's a picture of my mother down there, a drawing of her from 1947 with long brown hair. I mean, talk about patterning, right? So Debbie walks into the room, and she's wearing she's got long brown hair down to her waist, and she has this bright fire engine red dress on. I mean, that's what really decapitated me. It was a bright red dress. Okay.
So you were just like, it just got you right then.
I think so, yes, because I was already on.
He was already leaning.
What did the red have to do with it?
He was
I don't know, but I
just worked.
She planned that.
He
Oh,
doesn't-
definitely.
Yes, red, there's intention.
Yes,
He doesn't
you're
know,
right.
but he
Yeah.
knows. He knows what he likes.
Planned it, right?
there's power.
Red
There's
is
power
the-
red.
Yeah, she didn't show up in beige.
Yeah,
With her hair in a little bun.
absolutely.
We're suckers, aren't we, man?
Yeah.
Right.
We were,
Easy.
Easy.
we're programmed to be that way.
Okay, so all right, so anyway, I admit that, but
We only fight it a little
from the
bit.
time I got the first email from her, my psyche was already moving to her. Okay, because as soon as she responded, and I said, wow, I have a response on the internet. Already you're making some sort of connection with this person. And then within 5 minutes, I'm looking up her interests, and I'm saying, wow, Japan, Japanese language. And I by that time, I had lived 8 years in Japan, and I'd had a lot of people tell me that they could speak Japanese, and I always say, I always say Doko ni Benkyo Shimashitaka, but Debbie corrected me yesterday. She said Doko ni Benkyo Shimashitaka.
We wouldn't know.
Which
Yeah,
all
it
it
all
means,
sounds the same.
all it means is where did you study Japanese? Where did you study? And everyone else just flaked out at that point. I mean, maybe they could count to 10 or something like that and say Ohio gozaimasu, but they couldn't speak in a fluent manner like that. But Debbie, I wrote to her in Japanese. My second message to her was in Japanese, Roman letter Japanese. And she wrote back to me in Japanese and made me go to my dictionary. And then I knew I was in trouble right then. Okay, and that happened on the first day. Okay, that happened a week before I met her. But then I got down there, I meet her. She says, "Oh, well, here's my resume." So she gives me her resume. She's a Phi Beta Kappa in Asian Studies. She went to East West Center and got a master's degree in Japanese sociolinguistics. And she's wearing this red dress, and we go out to dinner for sushi that night. I mean, but I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. You know, it was all very chaste and everything. But once she left me, and she was living with another man at the time. But once she left me, I just couldn't think of anything else. And so the next 4 months
That's the word we always use.
smitten, but I was possessed. I was definitely possessed, and I wasn't conscious about all this anima stuff. So definitely that was my anima just taking over. And 4 months later, I told my wife of 17 years, "Sorry, I'm moving out."
That is the projected state. So how do you move from there to the possessed state? It's a progression. Right?
You don't
Well-
want to go to possessed.
Well,
Well, it says it's
well,
progression.
possessed is like Donald Trump, who marries the same woman every time. He's married
By
3
knowing
women.
you're possessed and controlling it, then you've got your anima or animus. In other words, that's when you're conscious of your anima and animus, and that's what he's talking about.
But shouldn't number 3 be number 2 then?
What?
The possessed state would actually be before.
Well, possessed state is like the negative side it's the non-knowing side of the function, whatever the function
Yeah,
is.
where you can't control it.
You're trying to become conscious of things. Some people never get past the shadow. They don't realize that everything they're projecting out there is evil and mean is actually coming from within them.
Right.
And so if they never know that, then they're shadow possessed, so to speak. And
Right.
And the same thing with anima and animus. If you don't know, like if every time I saw somebody that looked like Corona, I went, "Oh my God," I would be possessed. But I'm conscious enough to know that I'll never do that again. Just kidding.
So, well, the conscious state is knowing it's happening to you and being able to hold it off. Okay?
Yeah.
And so, the third stage, your part for Gwynne, was becoming conscious of the archetypal spirit. This archetype, as I noted above, is often represented in fairy tales as the wise old man, especially for men. For women, it often takes the form of Magna Mater, the great Earth Mother. The individuation process is primarily one of uniting opposites. In the first step, we unite good and evil and try to see ourselves as capable of both. Eastern religions often symbolize this with the lotus, which has its roots below in the dirty mud and its flower in the clean air above. And we see ourselves as containing both masculine and feminine characteristics. Now we must unite matter and spirit, form and formlessness, body and psyche. Jung called the archetypes of spirit and matter mana personalities, where mana means extraordinary power. In part, this step includes liberation of a man from his father and of a woman from her mother, leading in both cases to true individuality. Okay, well, I guess. I mean,
Some of the women writers have broken the archetype, like you said Earth Mother, or
Yeah.
some of them have broken it down to what, Maid, Mother, and Crone.
Right.
What is
Okay, becoming conscious of the self. Jung called this final step self-realization. We could therefore translate individuation as coming to selfhood or self-realization. Jacobi says, for the conscious personality, the birth of the self means a shift in its psychic center and consequently an entirely different attitude toward and view of life. In other words, a transformation in the fullest sense of the word. The self is often symbolized by a circle or mandala, glyphs which represent completeness. Each step of the individuation process has its dangers that must be avoided, and each has its rewards. He warns the individuation is an ongoing, endless process, and that as it progresses, the chief danger is an inflation of the ego. Jung's individuation is similar, if not identical, to the self-actualization of Maslow. But why does the ego need to approach the self if it is to all end in death? Jung says the psyche itself, in relation to consciousness, is pre-existent and transcendent. So while the ego is born, grows, and dies in the same way as the body, the psyche itself, and especially the self, is not under the same limitations. Jung's eternal archetypal self is probably the chief subject of disagreement with other psychologists, and one reason why mainstream materialistic psychologists fail to take him seriously. He is, however, taken seriously by today's transpersonal psychologists.